So thank you so much for yesterday. It was, and I was just saying off camera, it was really gorgeous to hear some of the way that you talked about the sort of vulnerability and the concerns. Can you talk a little bit about what you presented on yesterday?
Yeah. Yesterday I was specifically focusing on the way that Indigenous people relate to each other when a queer identity is involved in the mix. So I was looking at the kind of contours and margins that occur and are created by queer Indigenous people.
It was interesting hearing some of the other speakers yesterday too, as well as you. You know, totally introduced it. It was this whole idea that that there are these that this is this space in which it's constructed. You know, it's not necessarily something that is new, you know, but that there's this notion throughout the 20th century that it's something that's new that's happened to our communities, and you really challenged that.
Yeah, and what's typically conveyed is that it is a negative space, but I really wanted to reframe that as a transformative space and a space which can recalibrate.
Yeah.
As you said yesterday, how we see Indigenous identities in those kind of multi-dimensional trajectories we have as Indigenous people.
Yeah, and you're doing your PhD at the moment. You know, and obviously it includes a whole lot of these ideas.
Yeah.
And you're also a very well-respected drag performer, a person who performs into that space.
Yes.
And can you talk a little about that?
Yep. Well, I'm specifically studying at UOW for my PhD under Indigenous Studies unit, focusing on transgender Indigenous identities, but I tend to reach out across the queer spectrum for my work and keep it creative and dynamic. And in that space, I also like to add an element of performance, and that's where my drag comes in. My drag persona has been known to subvert the drag space as well. So I'm kind of managing these kind of bicultural, bigendered spheres in one to kind of inform and feed into my PhD work.
I just think some of the work that you were referring to yesterday and talking about, in fact we were having an exchange about it, about the whole Tiwi Sister Girls and how that's become the phenomenon of those people who are engaged in that space, but also the phenomenon of how people see that space operating.
It's such a vibrant community.
Amazing.
It's hard to miss it.
Yeah.
If people don't know, it's a group of transgender identified Aboriginal people who have formed a community located 1.5 hours approximately from Darwin. And I have made contacts with them and kind of try to add them and reflect on them in my own work. Yeah.
And it was really obvious yesterday. I guess I have to say that I think from history of and tracking of this of the phenomenons that are happening at the moment, your work is going to be really incredible. And to that end, you've got an archive that you're working on. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
That's right. I've got my own personal side project, which started off as a bibliography, as a way for me to gather sources available of the representations of queer Indigenous people. And I kind of had the revelation that this should be public, this should be accessible, and especially by queer Indigenous people who are growing up and looking to see themselves in online spaces and find their kin as queer Indigenous people. So instead of keeping this bibliography to myself, I decided to structure it in a simple way and kind of provide that. And I only utilise what is available on the internet. Because when you're searching for your identity on the internet, it's really quite sparse and all over the place for queer Indigenous people. So I wanted to gather that into one portal.
And you talked about that right at the beginning of saying you're not trying to reveal anything that people don't want to have revealed about themselves. It's the public information, which is wonderful, And but also, I just do have to say it's remarkable to have that because it doesn't exist at the moment. There isn't anything that works like that, and it's almost horrendous to think that we haven't been tracking this
Right.
in a meaningful way. So
I
yeah.
kind of viewed it as what would I want as a 17-year-old queer Indigenous person.
Wow.
And I looked back into my own memories and thought, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted to see myself. I wanted to know that I had a place in my community and in my culture. And as I've explored my topic through my PhD thesis, it has kind of fallen into place and has fed into this project. So yeah, it's been a really positive thing for me.
Amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I really
No problem.
appreciate it.
Thank you.